I want to read something that I thought was interesting. The history of Mother's Day dates back to the 1600s in England, but it was in 1872 that Julia Ward Howe first suggested the idea of an official Mother's Day in the United States. But it was Anna Jarvis who was recognized as the mother of Mother's Day, and the holiday was declared officially by Woodrow Wilson to be a national holiday the second Sunday in May in 1911. What's interesting is that this Anna Jarvis, who was the founder, she was never married and never had any kids. I did mention Miss Ruby Hill. Ruby had been a California Baptist for most of her life, and she was at a church where I served, and she was 6 years old, still serving as the minister of education, and it was very unfortunate, but she tripped and fell in church. She ended up breaking a hip, and it was about a year or so after that she went to be with the Lord. But she never had a child. She was never married. But did she love kids? So when we think about recognizing mothers, what I think about personally is I think about recognizing that unique creature that God planted on the earth that was going to be so sensitive, so loving, so caring to kids, that when men were off and out hunting, or in today's society, leaving or abandoning homes, it's the mother that was going to hold and is going to hold society together. Now, not all of you ladies have or will have children, and there's some young girls here, and we don't know where you will be in the future, but we would like to take a minute and officially recognize you, and we have a gift, and we have some kids. So kids, if you'll stand up now and come on up to the front, wherever you are. I think we should have some maybe up in the balcony as well. Come on up, kids. And did Miss Lou tell you to start in the front and work your way back? Did she assign you a particular spot? Okay, let's do this then. Why don't you two work down this side? Let's see. Have we got someone up in the balcony? We'll need someone up in the balcony to hand them out up there. And I know Lou had all this planned, but I said, let's wait just a little bit because I wanted to tie this into my message. So why don't you, by the way, this is Kenya's little boy, Noah. Why don't you and you two work this aisle, and Noah, why don't you come over here and just pass this down and let the ladies just take one, and then you guys can come over here. Noah, come on up here, buddy. And here's a lady right here, I think that she's the mother of, I know, at least my two precious children, and you guys can start over here and let the ladies take these, okay? Can you do that? And Lou, I apologize, I probably messed up everything you did. But while they're doing that, I wanted to look at this because I had something in my notes that I was going to mention, and when it was brought to my attention that this gift is a really beautiful pen. It says, "Blessed is the woman who walks with the Lord." Now, ladies, when you get this pen, there's some of you ladies who are going to think, well, that's funny. Why would a pen have an eraser on the end? And I wanted to let you know that this is not an eraser, it's a stylist. Okay, so you can use this to push on your phone. Just set the alarm. We don't want to set the alarm. But this is what you can use this for. So it's a stylist. And it's not someone you go to get your hair done. All right? It's a stylist for a computer. Now, kids, you'll think that's funny. But, you know, some of your moms, and some of you kids are 50, 60 years old. Some of your moms grew up in an age when a program was a TV show. It wasn't something that ran a computer. You remember that, right? When a cursor was someone used profane language, not something that directed the mouse on the computer. And a mouse pad was actually where a mouse lived. It wasn't something that you used to direct. The hard drive was not something that stored information on your computer. It was actually getting in the car with those kids for an 8-hour trip. That was a hard drive. And an app is actually not something you use on your phone. It was something that you used when you went in to go apply for a job. It was short for application, which some of you have not had the chance to do yet. And your parents may be saying, get out and do it. That means kids get out and fill out an app. And that's an application for a job. You might be able to do it online, but either way you do it, I would recommend you do it. So this is a stylus, and you can use your smartphone with it. I don't think this will work on your computer at home, so don't take it to your computer at home. And, that's like putting white out on your computer screen. Okay. Get in trouble with that one. Depending on what color your stylus colors your hair. Oh, boy. We are going to be talking about Mother's Day today. I was looking through the Acts series, and really where we are in Acts chapter 7 ties in nicely with ladies, because that chapter talks about the widows and how the widows were being dealt with in a way that needed special attention. And so the apostle said, let's pick out, or you choose out 7 men who are faithful and full of the Spirit and put them in charge of the feeding of the widows, and that's what happened. But I thought to myself, we'll move off of the Acts and talk more specifically just about mothers. Some of you are here today, many of you. I know that many of you in the ages of 60, 70, 80, there's a good chance your moms and dads have passed away. This will be the 10th year later on in this year, in just a few months, that my mom passed away. And she passed away very unexpectedly. She had had continuing problems with arthritis in her neck and her back, and she had back surgery, and from a complication with back surgery, she got that staph infection. And little did we know, but it wasn't long before she passed away. So Mother's Day is kind of an empty day for me. My father, a couple of years afterwards, remarried, but it's impossible really for me to see Sandy as my stepmother at my age, or even to call her or recognize her as mother. I tried that one time, and it just felt too uncomfortable. There's nothing that will replace a mom. For those of you who have lost moms, you know what it's like. And it's very unfortunate that many people lose their moms when they're very, very young, and they don't get a chance to know their moms. Dads are important, and dads, I'm not sure what we'll do with you in June. You probably won't get a nice pen with a stylus. I don't know, one time we gave out paint brushes and screwdrivers, but the guys didn't know what to do with that, most of them. So I'm not sure what we'll do. But there's something more special about a woman than we as guys will ever know. And I think there's a very special reason that the God's Son Jesus came to be born through a human mother. God could have done that in any way he wanted to. God could have just caused Jesus to have been raised up or appeared from under a rock or a bush. He could have been an orphan that came rolling in town that had no connection to a mother or a stepfather. But there's something very significant to the fact that the God-man Jesus, and Jesus is God. Yes, we recognize him as the Son of God, as we recognize the Spirit as the Spirit of God, or the Father as the Father God. However you want to recognize God, God is God, and Jesus clearly is God. Now, Jesus' earthly father was a stepfather. He had no physical, biological contribution to the birth of Jesus And you know what I'm talking about. But Mary fully and completely had the experience of carrying Jesus within her body, giving birth to him, nursing him, and caring for him and raising him. So Mary had all of the same similar experiences with Jesus as a child, except for conception with a man. Why God chose Mary, other than she was a righteous woman who was loving and caring, we don't really know. If God chose to come in and bless another nation besides the Jews, it could have been a woman from Korea or the Philippines or Africa or Alaska or India. It just so happened that Judaism and where they were located in the area controlled by the Rome was at the crossroads of what we recognize as ancient society. And so God chose the Jews and chose Mary. We do know that Mary is claimed by the Bible to be the blessed of all women. And certainly you would expect that, wouldn't you? If God picked you, any of you ladies, to bear his son, the Son of God, then certainly you would feel that you would be the most blessed of all women. But something that we have to recognize is Mary was most likely a very young teenager when the Holy Spirit came upon her. She was betrothed to a man. That meant that she was engaged but not married, but almost married, more so than being engaged in our society. And she was of childbearing age, but God did not come down and say, now I am going to pronounce you the God-woman or the God-mother of the God-child. And I know that may be a bit confusing for some of you who have grown up in a culture that recognizes Mary as more of a God part of the Trinity. But what we want to see here is what we see from Scripture is that Mary was a woman who had, I'm going to point out, 4 unique traits or characters, and she just did what God told her to do. But it started with the fact that Mary had the nature of a woman. And the nature of a woman, the nature of a female creation, is to love her children. We've got some pictures of some mothers and some babies up here. Let's look at a couple of these just to get this bond, just to understand I think we had another one up there. There we go. That's the one that we wanted. Jason, you must have slipped that in on me. We'll talk about that later. Jason had nothing to do with that. The point is that in nature, God has created this nurturing spirit. And it doesn't matter if it's in the animal kingdom, of which we are a part, or in the human culture of which we are created. And so when God came upon this person, Mary needed the identification of a child before she fully understood the entire process of birth through child raising. So in this situation, Jesus came along, and Jesus represents then a son's love for his mother. So the text primarily is going to be found in John chapter 2. We jumped ahead just a little bit there. We're looking at Jesus, the son's love for his mother. We're going to look now at the text in John chapter 2. So let's flip to that, Jason. Back to the text. If you've got your Bible, I want you to open up. I want to read briefly through this text. It's kind of a snapshot in the early ministry of the life of Jesus. And then we're going to jump back and see these 4 qualities about Mary and how she trusted in her instincts, in God, in her husband, and in her son. But in this text in John chapter 2, this is the very first miracle that's recorded in the Gospel of John. So, Mary is of age where she's most likely around 30-something, maybe 40-something. Let's assume that maybe she was conceived with Jesus at 12, and then Jesus was 12 years old when he first was recognized as being in the temple. And you remember Jesus went into the temple. He left his earthly father and his mother and went into the temple, and they were looking for him. And he said, "Why were you looking for me? Surely I would be in my Father's house." Now, between the age of 12 until the age of 33, we know very little or nothing from the Bible, but very little from other historical texts about the life of Jesus. So, if Mary would have been 12 when she conceived, about 24, 25 when we first see Jesus come on the scene as a 12-year-old, now Jesus is approximately 30. Mary probably would have been in her mid-40s. So Mary is at a wedding. The text tells us in chapter 2 of John, verse 1, it's on the third day, and there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus was also invited. Probably it was a family celebration then. His disciples were there also. So Jesus had just begun his early ministry. The disciples were there. Jesus was there. Now it says the wine gave out. Now, I know there's some controversy in Baptist thinking. Is wine just grape juice that's not fermented? Or is it grape juice that's fermented? You'll have to read the Bible and figure that one out for yourself. But as you read through this text, it's fairly clear that they're drinking wine and they run out. So it was important that they replace the wine that was drunk. So, when the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus says to him, "They have no wine." In verse 4, Jesus says to her, "Woman, what do I have to do with you? My hour has not yet come." In other words, Jesus is saying, it's not time for me to begin my miracle ministry. Up until this point, there's no record of Jesus ever committing any kind of a miraculous act. Now, there are some historical writings. You need to understand this if you don't know it. Not from the Bible, but from extra biblical material that does say that Jesus performed miracles as a child. I'm not going to tell you they're true because they're not in the Bible. So I have to just look at the Bible and believe that for what it says. But one of those, for example, is that Jesus was playing as a little boy, and there was a dove or a bird or a pigeon that was found dead, and Jesus picked the pigeon up, breathed on it, and it came to life and flew away. Now, I don't believe that happened because it's not in God's Word. But I often ask myself, and to be honest with you, you probably ask yourself too, did Jesus do anything miraculous as a kid? Now, that's a fair question to ask. Mary knew there was something special about Jesus. She did not understand that Jesus would be the sacrifice for sin for the world and that he would die on a cross. But there's something going on here in Mary's mind. The Spirit may be talking to her, but whatever is happening, she is pushing Jesus and saying, "Jesus, they're out of wine, and I want you to do something about it." Well, Jesus' response, not in a negative way, although it could be read, "Woman, what do I have to do with you about this?" That's not the sense in which I believe it was written. Woman would have been a sign of respect. What would you like me to do? It's not my time yet. So then the mother says to the servants, "Whatever he tells you to do, do it." So she left it on Jesus to decide. Was he going to do something about the problem, get more wine, or was he going to decide not to do it? So out of respect for her son, she told the servants who were there serving the wine to wait until Jesus decided what to do. Verse 6, it says, "Now there were 6 stone water pots that were set before the Jewish tradition for purification, and they contained 20 or 30 gallons of water." So what the Jews would do is they would collect water pots and keep plenty of water around, and these pots of water were used to purify various things according to the Jewish tradition. So Jesus said, fill them up to the top. And so he said to them, "Draw some out and take it to the head waiter," in verse 8. And they took it to the head waiter. And at this time, I want to break from the story just a moment, tell you the conclusion of it. It did turn out to be wine, some very good wine, as a matter of fact. In some ways, Mary probably could have boasted that her son saved the wedding and gave the guests what they needed. But that's not the issue here. The issue here is that Mary was a woman of very unique characteristics. And all these characteristics are seen in this text and a couple other supporting texts, but there are 4 things about Mary that we're going to see. First of all, she was a woman who trusted God. She was a wife who trusted her husband. She was a mother who trusted her son. And she was a woman who trusted her godly instincts. Now that word trust, if we can look at it for just a moment, it comes from the same kind of root word where we find faith or belief or confidence. So what Mary placed her trust in, she placed her trust first in God, her husband, her son, and her godly instincts. What I'd like to do is to look at the first point. If you'd like to turn quickly to Luke chapter 1, verse 38, we'll get a little insight into this young girl, Mary, prior to her conception. She was betrothed, which meant that she was not engaged, but she was kind of engaged. It was almost like she was married, but she was not quite married, but she had been promised or given to her husband-to-be. And so the Bible tells us that her Aunt Elizabeth was with child. That's going to be John the Baptist, who is going to be born shortly before the birth of Jesus. But we see Mary now, and the Bible tells us, we'll look at one verse, chapter 1, verse 38. An angel had come to Mary and had told to her that she was going to bear a child. And then Mary says back to this angel in verse 38, "Behold, the bondslave of the Lord, be it done to me according to your word." And the angel departed from her. Think with me for just a moment. Here's a young girl in a society where extramarital sex could cause you to be stoned to death, literally. Here's a society where if you became with child and you were not married, you would be stoned to death. This is a young girl. Now, I've looked online, I've looked through the Bible, I've tried to see a timeline to see if there's any indication if this little girl knew biologically. You know, each month women know biologically how their bodies are working. And I'm trying to say this in a sensitive manner. I'm trying to find out if Mary had any suspicions biologically because things weren't happening the way they were supposed to be happening, and I don't see that here. In other words, it's not that she knew she was in trouble and she didn't know what to do about it, and then an angel showed up and she went, "Whew, man, I'm glad I got a way to figure this out because I've been worrying about this. And my time came and it went and nothing happened. And I've really been worrying, but I know that Joseph and I have not had any relationships. I know that I'm pure," Mary is saying, "but there's a problem going on here. And I don't want to tell my mom. I don't want to tell my dad. I don't want to tell my sisters or my friends." She would have had many people to talk to at that time. But here she is, and who does she have to go to? Some of you may have been in that situation at some time in your life. Some of you may have had kids who have been in that situation. I can only know from being with parents who have been in that experience. It's a shocker. It's a rude awakening. It's a moment when you have to think to yourself, are you going to get past the anger and the guilt and the failure and the frustration and recognize that what is, and a child, a precious child's going to be born. And don't seek alternatives. Don't find ways to dispose of that problem, but recognize that in some way you can trust God as Mary trusted God, and she knew that she was in God's will. So here's Mary. I'm supposing that she doesn't think she's with child yet, and she hears this news. Now you have to imagine or think to yourself, she's got to be going, wow, did I have a dream last night? Now think about it. If you supposed an angel came to you ladies, you single ladies, unmarried, and told you that you were going to conceive miraculously without having a physical relationship, what would your initial feelings be? Probably one of doubt, one of confusion. Mary, in her heart, though, must have had a relationship with God that was so significant that when God looked down and could have chosen from all of the ladies who would have been virgins, who would have been among the tribes of the different people of the Jews, he looked into the heart of Mary and recognized, our first point here, that Mary was a woman who trusted God. Now we have to remember this story because time's going to pass, and then she's going to have to come to her husband, and she's going to have to trust her husband. So the second quality of this special woman is that she is a wife who trusted her husband. Now, the text that we're going to look at comes from Luke chapter 2, but it's really in the story of the birth and the early years of Jesus, which Luke tells so very well. So we're not going to single out any particular verses here, but you know the story. Now, imagine, ladies, that first of all, you've conceived and you had to convince your fiancé that you've not had a relationship with another man, but you're going to have a child. That's a tough one. That really is. Now, in these days, I don't think it was any easier to explain than it would be today. Actually, it would have been harder because Joseph could have put her away, could have had her stoned, but he was going to do the reasonable thing until he had an encounter with God also, and God convinced him that he was to care for Mary because Mary was chosen and special, and she was going to bear Emmanuel, and the name Emmanuel means God with us. And so Joseph understood that. He's beginning to see this baby grow within the woman he loves. And he does. I believe he deeply loves Mary. And so this baby is beginning to grow, and the months are passing now. People are seeing it. They're talking. You know what's going on anytime there's gossip happening. But now there's a tax issue going on. And they have to go from one place to another place, and they have to count the census to see who belongs to what group, what tribe. And so Joseph says, and I don't know what this conversation must have looked like. Mary was probably in her 8th month. We're speculating that. We don't know for certain, but we don't believe that Jesus was a very early premature birth. So we're going to just assume that she was in her 8th month. Now, some of you ladies may have been with child in your 8th month and you wanted to fly somewhere. Airlines won't let you fly if you're in the 8th month. At least that's customary. Perhaps under some circumstances they might allow that. But generally speaking, ladies, would you want to get in an airplane and go on a long trip if you were in your 8th month? Most likely not. Now, let me ask this question. How many of you would like to get on the back of a donkey and ride cross country for at least a week to get where you're going in your 8th month in pregnancy. Think about that for a moment. Never heard a sermon on this, but I just envision this very rotund woman bouncing up and down on a donkey, and it would take probably a week because it was 80 miles and it would have been a difficult trip. They would have had to stop frequently for her to rest. But then she gets where she's going, and no wonder she's gone into labor. I mean, think about that for a moment. Tough trip, gets where they're going. There's no room in the inn. You see how God orchestrated all this? He planned it. God could have put off the pregnancy just a couple of months to let the census pass, right? Then she could have rode the donkey maybe in her 2nd or 3rd or 4th month. But God planned all this. God allowed all that. Surely, God could have made reservations in the very best hotel in the city in Bethlehem, but he chose not to. They showed up, no reservations, no place to stay, in the house of bread, that's the name of Bethlehem, where the Son of God, the bread of life, would be born. Mary certainly could have refused her husband and said, Joseph, you are out of your mind. There's no way I'm getting on that donkey for a week to get up just so they can count me as being there. But don't you see, she understood the providence of God. She trusted God, and she trusted her husband. The next point is that she was a mother who trusted her son. I want to get back to this text that we read earlier. Mary knew what the angel told her, but I believe in her heart, as she raised this baby to be a young boy, as she recognized him as a 12-year-old in the temple, heard what others said about him, and just looked at him and watched him interact with other kids and people. Wouldn't you mothers know that Mary knew that Jesus was a very special little boy? I mean, most mothers think their kids are special. It's something about a mother that just loves a baby. I think I'm going to tell about my wife just a little bit. And by the way, I do talk about her at times, and she talks to me afterwards at times, but usually it's okay, and she's accustomed to me. My wife grew up, and she preferred to play with toys or sports or anything that had like a ball or a bat. That's what Debbie enjoyed. So when her sisters got out the dolls and got out the little baking things and all that other stuff, she was like, give me a ball, give me something to play with. That's just her nature. But when I saw my wife hold her kids, it's different. The mother instinct was just so naturally there. And I know that she's thinking in God's timing, when grandkids come along, that'll be a wonderful, wonderful thing. I'm probably a bit different. I'm a man. I don't know how you guys think about that. I know that should a grandchild come along at the appropriate time, that I'm very comfortable with that. And that grandchild will be very meaningful and special to me. But right now, honestly, when my wife sees a baby, it's almost like when I look at a puppy. I mean, seriously, when I see a puppy, man, I'm ready to get out on the floor and play and tussle and throw that little puppy around and let it just jump all over me and lick my face in that little puppy breath. It's the same way when my wife sees a baby. I'm not that way. And I'm not apologizing. It's not that I don't like babies, but I just don't have the same feeling. But Mary had this natural inbred feeling about this son, Jesus. And as she saw him grow up, she knew in her heart that she could trust him. She knew he was going to do amazing things. The angel promised it. Joseph heard it. She witnessed this child grow to be an amazing child. And then we see Jesus at this wedding, and here's what Mary did. She said, son, there's a need. I know you can meet it, but it's up to you. Now, some of you kids, there's going to come a time in your life where your mom and or your dad, but perhaps your mom in this illustration, is going to say, you can do this, and then she's going to walk away. In other words, she's going to trust you kids that you will do the right thing. She had raised Jesus just like your moms. Now I'm talking to kids. Your mom's raised you. She's poured time into you. She's given you values and ethics. She's taught you the Word of God. She's brought you to church. And now she's letting you make the tough choices. Now she's still there to guide you. But moms, if you haven't caught on, I'm the kind of guy that believes in tough love as an individual. And I do believe that we have to practice tough love. There's a time when we need to spoil our kids and spoil them rotten. There's a time when they're broken or hurting and they need to come back under our wing, and we need to open our doors and care for them for a season. But we're also responsible, just like the mother bird, to at times push our birds out of the nest and let them hit the ground. Mary had come to the point where she recognized, I believe, it was time to let go and let Jesus. Now, it just hit me. I don't know if this is a Holy Spirit thing or not, but that may be why Jesus replied back, woman, instead of mother. Think about that. We know there are times when people said, Jesus, your family's outside, your mother, your brothers, they want to see you. And Jesus said, who are my brothers, my mother? I think this is a text where Mary said, it's time to let Jesus go and move into his place in life that God had called him. And he did not disappoint her. The last point is that she was a woman who trusted her godly instincts. And I think these 2 points tie in together. She knew in her heart what happened to her when she was a little girl, probably somewhere around 12 or 13 years old. And kids, you need to talk to your moms and dads about this. But in those days, they got married when they're 12, 13, and 14. Not today. Did you hear me? Just don't think about it. It's a different culture. It's a different day. Maybe it was a better day in some ways, but kids didn't have teenage lives back in those days. They went from being a child to being a woman or a man. And there was no time to goof around and sow your oats and figure out what you want to do with life and do all that other stuff. But Mary knew it was time to let go because she knew in her heart, God said, cut the apron strings. Let Jesus be Jesus. And she knew that was right. In concluding, I want to just talk about the last thought, and that is that God has such a love. Go ahead and flip to that last screen. God has such a love for all children. And we've talked about mothers and how mothers especially have that unique love for kids, but dads, I don't want to exclude you. There are so many dads who have risen to the top because mom had problems. Maybe she was an alcoholic, or she had drug addiction problems, or maybe she had other issues, or maybe she was tragically taken from the family at an early age, or maybe she gave up her life because of emotional or psychological issues. But dads, in many instances, have risen to the top and gone well beyond their natural abilities because God gave them that instinct that they needed to mother the children who had lost their mothers. Not only does God have such a natural love for children, but I believe we as a church need to also. We're getting ready to kick off Vacation Bible School here in a couple of weeks. It's hard to believe, in June. So I believe they're starting registration. Lou, is that right? Registration for VBS is beginning right now. We just got through with Upward. What a great ministry. During the offertory, we're going to do one of the song segments that was shown during the Upward time. So you could just get a view of what happened during that time. But when we think about Upward, when we think about VBS, when we think about the entire children's ministry, we think about all the summer camp activities that we've got going on, when we think about the Harvest Festival, the Christmas special times, the Easter extravaganza, when we think about God giving us a burden for kids so much that a school was birthed out of the nature of this church, out of the heart of the people, that God gave a vision for this church. It was a church with a school. It was never a school by itself, and it was really never a church by itself. But it recognized how the school and the church could be integrated into an entire ministry. And I believe, North Hills, that we need to focus a little bit more on our kids. Not just with our children's ministry. I'm not talking about that specifically, but I'm talking also about the school. I sensed when I got here, and I'm not passing blame or responsibility onto anybody, but I honestly felt when I got here that the church was the church, and then the school was the school. And I miss that connection that should be drawing the two together, that's like an open door where one passes into the other and the other passes into the one. And the preschool is like a feeder system. It's where parents trust North Hills. They trust our preschool, and they allow their precious little kids, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, to come and spend a great part of their day with us. They trust us. So we are a church, and they are people who trust North Hills, just like Mary was a woman who trusted God, trusted her husband, trusted her son, and trusted her instincts. We need to be a people who other people can trust to leave their kids with. And then they come to the preschool, they get older, and then automatically we should be assuming they're going to enroll into our kindergarten and move right into the first grade and right on up through the grades and graduate and stand out as people who were loved and cared for. And that takes all of us to make that happen. There's an old saying that in some tribes that it's not a mother who raises the son or the daughter, but it's the tribe that raises the children. Because everyone pitches in and realizes it's a communal effort. So as we enter into this time of invitation, what we're going to do is have a song of reflection, and then we're going to watch the VBS. And what I'd like you to do, I'm wanting to move through this a little bit quicker. I went over a little bit longer than I intended to this morning. But if you have a decision you'd like to make about the church, we're not going to have a walk the aisle invitation. We're just going to do, Josh, a song of invitation, and then I'm going to come a song of reflection, then I'm going to come up and pray, then we're going to have the offertory, and we're going to watch the video at that time. But here's what I want you to do. We've got the blue communication card. If you're interested in being a member, knowing more about Jesus, or wanting to join this church, fill this out, write down your comments on the back, and put the card in the offering plate as it comes along. Or better yet, if you're interested in knowing what membership at North Hills means, here's the very simplest way for you to find that out. Come have a complimentary meal with me next Sunday immediately following church. It'll be a good meal. I know you'll enjoy it. I'll be there to answer your questions. It'll take about an hour or less, and then you'll be able to find out all you need to know about the church. So let's think about your life, your participation in the church, your contribution to the children's ministry. Let's think about the needs that you may have with your own kids at home, and then think about what God's calling you to do in being a part of a child's life where you can make a difference.